Okay, we're on. So, good morning, everybody. We have a guest today with us. She is Dr.Andra Smith from the University of Ottawa, and she is a neuroscientist. She and I have done some work together over the past couple of years. She's been very influential in helping me better understand brain stuff. And so, most of the conversation this morning is going to be her helping us understand even some more things. So before we do that, good morning, Andra. How are you?
Well, thank you. How are you?
Good, good.
Good.
And how's your life changed lately?
Oh, good heavens. I'm an introvert, so I don't really mind being at home. And I love my kids, so I'm really taking advantage of being able to spend time with them. And so it's changed a lot, but I'm taking it more like, what is it giving me than what is it taking away from me? So I'm actually, I'm okay, and I'm enjoying this time.
That's a really good attitude. We did a recovery hour show last night on mental health stuff, and that's one of the things that we talked about quite a bit, is you can look at something and complain about it, or you can look at something and figure out, okay, what are the benefits of this? What is this going to give me? How is this going to help me?
Mm-hmm.
And how are your kids
Because the thing is, we just don't have any control.
Absolutely.
We have no control, and so just letting go of that is really, it's quite calming. And so my kids are they're doing fine, thank goodness for technology, because they're able to connect with their teachers and with their friends and with their other support system. And so they're okay. They're okay. Yeah, they're keeping busy. And when I see that they're not happy, then we go for a walk and have a chat. So
good. Awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, so you put together a really interesting slideshow. I'm going to pull it up here. And is there video in it? I can't remember.
No, I had sent you that Dan Siegel video, and I'm not sure. I didn't embed it, so it might not be there. But that's okay. I'm going to talk about all the things that he talked about.
That's the wrong screen. Sorry. You can amuse people while I figure this out.
So Rand asked me to talk about how the teenage brain develops. And so I am going to do that. Our brains control everything that we do, and it's an incredible organ that we have. And that is not the most up-to-date one, Rand. Sorry.
It is not.
No, sorry.
Okay. Keep talking.
Okay, so our brains control everything that we do, good and bad. And it all starts with how the brain develops and how it's evolved over hundreds of thousands of years. And what's really neat is that our brains are really similar to other animals. We've just gotten better, basically. And I'll talk about each of the parts and how that has happened, if I could see a slide.
We're getting there.
Our brains are really complicated, hundreds of billions of neurons, or cells that are the sort of building blocks of all of behavior. And
jeez. I'm sorry.
That's not bad though.
Well, it's not in a slideshow format though, for some reason. Hang on.
Can you?
I can just go through it.
Sure, that's fine.
Okay.
We adapt.
Okay.
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 So we can go to prenatally. Prenatally, the brain really gets set up and grows and finds connections with other parts, and it's quite amazing what happens, because the brain actually in utero creates more neurons than it really needs. And that's just in case there's a problem, just in case there's injury or damage. And so when a baby is about to be born, there's this pruning process that goes on, where some of the neurons that we don't really need are kind of cropped, basically.
Can I ask
And
you a
that's
question?
of course.
So how does a mom's stress impact prenatal development? Because we were talking about that yesterday, or a couple of days ago, about ADD and ADHD with Dr. Gabor Mate.
Yeah, so it certainly doesn't help, because it sends off cortisol, and cortisol can be quite damaging to the brain, to the developing brain. And so certain hormones are going to be released that can impact that pruning, and then the next step, which is that optimizing, that myelination that happens. So definitely maternal stress can impact the developing brain.
Okay, so moms should be working on meditation and stuff like that.
Well, it's yeah.
Yeah, okay.
So that myelination is again that kind of maximizing or optimizing the brain before birth. What's really, I think, really neat about our brain is what I was saying, that our brain has expanded, but grown on top of the other animals' brains, basically, and parts. And from an evolutionary perspective, we still have this sort of reptilian or earlier brain at the back that helps us with things like breathing and swallowing, things that we really don't pay much attention to, and allows us to have that sense of safety. We know we're okay, we're breathing. And so that's sort of the reptilian brain that is then on top of that. We've got our mammalian or our midbrain with sort of more advanced abilities, like our ability to feel different types of emotions, like being scared, for example. So that fight, flight, or freeze that we often talk about, that's our mammalian brain, and that's what helps us survive. And so that's the part of our brain that helps us run if we see a bear, or move towards food because we need food to feed our brain and our bodies. It also helps to control our drinking, our fluid intake and reproduction, and also reward. So we'll keep that in mind. And that it's really the part that controls our essential needs, makes sure our essential needs are met. So that's our mammalian brain. And then on top of that, we have our prefrontal cortex. And that's the part that really distinguishes us from other animals. And this is what helps us make good decisions, plan, organize, set goals, not get distracted to accomplish those goals. And so this is like the CEO of our brain, the orchestra leader. And
So I have another question.
Of course.
So right now with this pandemic situation and everything's changing, people tend to get stuck in their mammalian brain because they're nervous and anxious.
Absolutely, 100%, yes.
And
so when you're stuck in that middle brain, you don't let your prefrontal cortex help you. And so then there's no cognitive input. You just have that emotional brain, that impulsive, I need to survive kind of activity. And so, yeah, that can be a problem.
Okay, and next slide, you want?
Well, no, just a sec. Go back, please.
Okay.
So this is the prefrontal cortex. So we talk about avoid, approach, attach. So we avoid harm, we approach rewards because we want our essential needs to be met. So we can be happy in that midbrain. But what really makes us happy, what gives us a real internal sense of peace and health, is attachment and connection with other people, and this more thinking brain helping us control that survival brain. And so when we talk about you often say you pet the lizard, you feed the mouse, and you hug the monkey. So that takes care of the reptile, mammal, and primate brains. And so that's where this saying, it's a jungle in there. And the truth is that there's always going to be that jungle in there. It's been around for hundreds of thousands of years, and we're not going to get rid of it. But that prefrontal cortex of ours can help us learn to tame it. And so that's what's really important about our prefrontal cortex. So yeah, we can go on to the next slide now.
Okay.
Thank you. What's interesting is that limbic brain, that middle brain, that mammalian brain is really intact from birth. And so we're ready to manage stress right from the start. But that prefrontal cortex is not. This is the part of our brain that really isn't developed. Often you hear people say our brains aren't developed till they're 25. This is the part that we're talking about. And in the teen years, it goes through, again, these two same critical phases of brain development, that pruning. So we've actually created more neurons than we need, more connections than we need. And now we want to prune and then maximize the best ones. So we're going to optimize our best ones. And in those teenage years, those two things are happening. And our brains develop from the back to the front. And it's a prefrontal cortex that really helps with things like executive functioning. So executive functioning is kind of an umbrella term for planning, organizing behavior, goal-directed behavior, impulsivity, those sorts of things, working memory as well. And so we need these two critical phases to have that conductor of the band creating the beautiful music that it can make, to help with the successes of becoming an adult, and kind of minimizing that emotional survival brain that we have, because we don't really need that as much as we used to. We really need to engage our prefrontal cortex a little bit more.
So I have another question.
Of course.
Does adolescent drug and alcohol use interfere with those developmental process?
Yes, of course it does. So one of the things that, and I'm going to talk about that, but one of the big things that impacts this pruning and myelination, these important developmental stages, is stress. And the other big one is drug use. So drug use can really hijack these two stages of development. And I'll mention that in a little bit as well. Okay. But because we're talking about the teen brain, I'm going to go a little bit deeper into that because I think it's really important. The prefrontal cortex, as I've said, it takes longer. It takes longer to develop. And here it's our striatum, and when I say striatum, it's that midbrain, that middle brain, that limbic brain, that it develops much quicker than the prefrontal cortex. So during adolescence, it's intact, it's ready for reward, it's ready for emotion. But the prefrontal cortex is a little bit behind. So there's going to be a lot more activity in that midbrain. And that's what then leads to some high-risk choices. Rather than thinking about the consequences, having that prefrontal cortex activity, you're kind of in that midbrain. And so emotional activity, emotional reactivity is much outpaced by cognitive control. And so we know that this happens. We know that the teen brain is more focused on reward and so oftentimes people say, and I think it's a very stereotypical saying, that teenagers are really impulsive and they always make poor decisions, and they can't they are just sort of made to defy their parents. And I think we can turn that around. So we do know that these things are in place. The adolescent brain is characterized by higher reward sensitivity. There's no question about that. And risk-taking behavior is often linked to this sort of development. But it's also really an exciting time of development for the brain. If you think about it, there's all these tools that are being developed. This prefrontal cortex is being developed, and it gets developed by being exposed to novelty. So the teen brain really seeks novelty, and the cognitive tools that are necessary to control that novelty seeking, that reward seeking, aren't quite in place. But if we can help mold that development, and if we don't just take the attitude that, yeah, all kids are going to drive fast, all kids are going to experiment with drugs, all kids are going to stay out past their curfew. I think if we can get away from those stereotypes, we could really help kids not act upon that risk-taking behavior. We know that reward is necessary to help develop our prefrontal cortex. Reward to help with that approach behavior toward novel stimuli, and experiencing new things, new surroundings, new social experiences are really critical for learning and for developing independence. And ultimately what teens are looking for is independence as well. And so I think parents and adults can really play a role in helping with this sort of their brains are really malleable, and so we can help guide their brain towards learning from this novelty seeking rather than suppressing it. And
so encouragement, not judgment.
Exactly. And so there's a few ways of obviously doing that. Your kid wants to speed when they're driving, so instead of just saying no, don't do that, maybe take them to a racetrack and give them a driving lesson, like have a professional driver give them a driving lesson. Have some other outlet for that need for speed. That's just one example, but and we'll talk about what it is parents can do to help with that. But finding out what it is that really drives your kids,
yeah,
is important. Asking them why is it that you want to drive fast? What is it that feels so good? Let's see if we can find something else that will give you that same feeling. So I do think that knowledge is power, and one of the things that you've talked about this a million times, but if we go down to the next, when I talk about those two stages, the pruning and the myelination, that both happen prenatally and in the teen brain. And there's a part of our brain, a system in our brain, that actually really helps with this. And so if you go to the next slide, the answer is actually our endocannabinoid system, which is our internal cannabinoid system. So this is a really unfortunate name, I think, for this system, because I think it makes it sound like our brains were just made for cannabis.
Yeah, I've heard that multiple times from kids. Like, as soon as you say that, they say, so does that mean I'm supposed to smoke? No.
Exactly. So no, because if you go to the next slide, it's a really neat system that actually helps with regulating all of those different things. So sleep, appetite, mood. There are receptors in our brains for our endocannabinoids all over our brain. And so that's why cannabis impacts so many different types of behaviors. But unfortunately, THC looks just like those endocannabinoids that we have, but in much, much higher concentrations. So our endogenous or our internal cannabinoid system really helps to balance a lot of these behaviors. Whereas THC, I'm not talking about CBD, I'm talking about THC here.
Yeah, that's the stuff in marijuana that gets
Really,
you high.
it does, and it's the stuff that gets you addicted.
Yeah.
It really floods that system. So the quantity of the THC is much, much higher than anything we have endogenously. And so it floods the system. And then all of those regulatory balance systems are flooded and can't do what they're meant to do. So in utero, natal exposure to cannabis is going to impact those stages of development. In the teen brain, it's also going to impact those two really critical stages of development. So I think that's really important to know. And if you go to the next slide, you'll see that an awful lot of really important behaviors are impacted and almost hijacked with teen use of cannabis. And it's not just cannabis, it's any drug.
Yeah, alcohol does the same thing.
Alcohol does exactly the same thing, impacts this balance that comes from the endocannabinoid system. So these are just some of the examples of things that different types of behavior that can be impacted. And we know that these are really critical to future success. And these are very reliant on the prefrontal cortex. And so we don't have that prefrontal cortex growth and optimization, these things are going to be impacted.
And so, I mean, what I often see with kids that have started using, fairly young at 14 or 15, and then I'm seeing them at 18 or 19. Emotionally, they still seem like they're stuck at like 14 or 15.
Mm-hmm.
Because so it's impeding the growth that should be there.
Exactly. That's exactly what's happening. Their prefrontal cortex just hasn't been fully developed.
And so if they stop using, does it catch up?
Well, funny you should ask that. Let's go to the next slide.
Almost like we've talked about this before.
So there is hope. Absolutely. So that's the amazing thing again about our brains. Our brains are amazing, in case you didn't know. There is hope. Our brains are extremely dynamic, especially in those teen years. Those teen years, I said till you're 25, you're not fully developed. You stop doing the drugs and the stuff that's impacting that development, and you've got a big time window to actually recover from that. And so, absolutely, you can make those good connections. Your prefrontal cortex still does have a chance of developing. Every day, our brain changes depending on what it's exposed to. And so this idea of neuroplasticity is huge. And it's a beautiful thing in a teenager in particular, but also in older adults. And so one thing is, though, that if you do take away that drug, if the teen is able to get rid of that drug, there has to be something that takes its place. Because one, they spend a lot of time with it, either they're trying to get it, they're doing it, etc. But also because they need to have some kind of way of feeling good. And so I think there's a couple examples here of things that can sort of fill their time and give them that natural dopamine. We didn't talk about dopamine. We didn't talk about any neurotransmitters, but dopamine is that reward seeking neurotransmitter, the chemical in the brain that is released when there is something that they like doing. So it's really important to find something that they like to do to help replace that dopamine that they've had from the drug. And it doesn't happen right away. the brain has certainly got this negativity bias that we've also talked about, you've also talked about before, that is hard to overcome. But with practice, with repetition, doing things over and over again, I think that anything can change. And so these are a few examples of things that can happen.
Well, and I've seen lots and lots of kids who've stopped using get back into the stuff that they used to like to do.
Right.
And they realize that this actually makes me feel better than that stuff did. But like you said,
Right.
it takes some work. There's a bit of a transition piece there.
Sure, yeah, but it's doable.
Yeah.
And so if you want to just keep going. So you asked me a few questions a couple of days ago that you sort of wanted me to address. Yeah. And so these are some of them, and I've addressed some of them, but I'd like to just jump into a few more of them. And I talked about the stereotypes of teens. Not all teens are the same. It's a pet peeve of mine, because I don't think they're all the same. I think we really have to respect individual differences. Reward sensitivity is different in teens. There are absolutely individual differences, different drives, different passions, and so I think it's dangerous to clump teenagers together. There's nothing that makes my daughter more annoyed than when we're walking down the street and there's a group of teenagers and somebody says, oh, those teens must be lurking there, ready to do something bad. Like just drives her nuts because she's not like that. And I think it's quite damaging to not celebrate individual differences and celebrate the fact that these brains are developing and we can help them develop, which brings me to I think the next thing, what can we do? So yes, some are more risk averse than others, and I do think it's absolutely both nature and nurture. I said that our brains have been like this for thousands of years. And so to really develop that prefrontal cortex takes a lot of nurturing, I think. And that's our role as parents to be able to do that, and support systems and adults. So do you want to just go to the next slide with respect to what parents can do to protect their teens? So that's not exactly what I'm saying here, but I really think that if we have healthy brains, so doing the things that lead to natural rewards can help us have healthy kids, and then from that we have happy families. And we touched on it, that you really need to listen non-judgmentally. So ask your kids, what do you like doing? What do you like about the things that you're doing? And just listen, and don't say, oh, well, why do you like that? Or why would you do that? Or be judgmental about it. I think that's really important. And I have two acronyms there that we might get to, but really the focus is to ask your kids what they like, what they want, what their dreams are, what their options are, why is it that they're doing the things that they're doing. And I think that can really help to open up a dialogue and help you be able to help them. And so I've listed a few natural rewards here, but really it's on an individual basis. And I really like this, the picture that you get what you focus on. So focus on what you want. Mm-hmm. And I think that's important. And mindfulness is a huge thing that can help us all. And especially in the time that we're going through right now, I think it's really important. But I think you are going to have another whole session on mindfulness.
And I've talked about it quite a bit. I mean, and really it's just that capacity to pay attention to what's going on right now and not not be
Yeah.
fast forwarding into, well, what's going to happen tomorrow, and just,
Yeah, yeah, or on rewind and
yeah.
go through what's gone on in the past. So this is an acronym that I actually stole from Dan Siegel, and but I do like it, and it really stresses what I was just saying, being a part of their lives. And so the P is for presence. So just asking them what they like. I mean, I already kind of spoke about that. Being attuned to what it is that is moving them, what is really getting them up in the morning, and what motivates them. And then the R is resonance. So just trying to be able to understand or feel the same sort of feelings that they're having. I mean, we were all kids too. And you should be able to at least empathize a bit with their struggles and their goals and their drives. And then T is trust, and I think everybody knows how important trust is between kids and parents. And I think if you listen non-judgmentally, and if you go through these presence, the attune, and the resonance, then that's going to help with the deeper connection.
Well,
Always remembering in the back of your mind that their brain really, it's not, they're not making all this stuff up. Their brain really does seek novelty, and it needs it to develop. We just need to help them because their control centers aren't fully developed. We have to become part of their control centers to help them.
Yeah, one of the
sorry?
things that when I'm talking to kids and parents together, like I will say, like, if you listen to your son or daughter and stay quiet and listen to what they're saying, they have really good capacity to figure this stuff out themselves. If somebody that cares about them respects them enough to just sit there and listen, and
Exactly.
and they hear themselves talking through whatever without being interrupted or criticized, they'll figure most of this stuff out themselves.
Yep.
And then your last one.
So this is just, so Dan Siegel is a big psychiatrist and has done all kinds of stuff with something called mindsight. And he talks about increasing self-awareness, and so you can pay attention to your internal compass. And that's the video that I had sent earlier that you might want to link to this. I don't know if you want to do that, or maybe play it another time. But he's the one that came up with that part. But as I was listening to what he was talking about, it made me kind of think of my own hack for supporting your teens. And so my hack is to honor. So just honor your teens individually. Find out what they want. Find out what their dreams are. I watched a TED Talk the other day that it was a teenager, and he was talking about, so when did dreams take a back seat to job security? And when did passion come second to productivity? And I thought, wow, that's really insightful. You know, like, we shouldn't be stamping on kids' dreams just because it might not be leading to a job that's going to make them $1 million. You know, that's not what teen dreams are about. Teen dreams are about, you know, just
finding yourself
and going out and trying to accomplish it. So honoring your kids, your child's individually, listening to them, taking interest in them, and then aligning with them, and supporting that and being their advocate. That's your job. And then constructively helping them to accomplish their dreams. That's my hack for parents.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much. I really appreciate you sharing that with us.
I hope
Uh,
that was okay
no,
and helped a little
well,
bit.
I enjoyed it. I learned some stuff, which is always one of my goals every day. So, you have a good day and continue to enjoy your kids. How's the weather in
Thank you.
Ontario?
Well, it hasn't been great, but I
Good.
think we're getting there.
Good.
My kids
Okay.
are out on a walk right now, so it's okay.
All right. Thank you. We
No
will
problem. Thank you
chat
for doing
again.
this. This
Okay.
is great. Yeah. Take care.
Thanks. Bye-bye.